The other thing that I think is relevant here is, I guess, the issue of prognosis, the assumptions made about the prognosis of a condition. And I think we are made to believe, companies who make antidepressants want us to believe that the prognosis is very bad. That if you are depressed, that is your condition. And I mean, I think goes far to explicitly say, at least if not imply, that it's permanent, that it is the permanent condition of your brain. Your brain produces a depressed state. And what a depressing prognosis. And so even to just question that assumption and consider the possibility that depression is definitely temporary, and that, who knows, maybe there is certain constitutions of people who are more prone to it and will experience periods of it throughout their life, and other people are more prone to experiencing periods of heightened anxiety. So I think that's totally natural. And to that degree, I suppose you could say that a person is prone to being depressed. But first of all, there's the question of like whether that's, how temporary is it? Because obviously nothing's permanent. So how temporary is this? But then there's also the question of, what is the real source of this depression? And I feel like there are people who would just hate to hear me say this, but is there any value in the emotions associated with depression? Is it a signal indicating that something is wrong, either in your individual life and bubble or on a much grander scale of the condition of humanity? And again, I think many people would hate to hear me say this, but I definitely believe that human emotions are very carefully selected by evolution as very important signals for the state of things and how conducive they are to our individual and collective thriving. And so if you wipe out all depression, we might lose very important feedback that our brains are giving us, essentially, about, again, the state of things and how conducive they are to our thriving. So there's just a lot of assumptions that have to be questioned in this whole narrative.
Yeah, I agree. I agree totally. And it's like going back to the fact that if we start to think about the fact that most of the conditions we find ourselves in, we can realistically most of the time work out what's going on in our lives and what's causing them. And surely, as long as we continue to prescribe antidepressants and see them as the first option for treatment when we get in trouble with life, then how are we going to grow as human beings? How are we going to develop? How are we going to learn? How are we going to cope in the future? I mean,
And how will we ever glean the insight that we could eventually pass on to future people who will be depressed?
Exactly. And there are lots of studies that have been done to show that. I think there was a study at Brown University, I think it was about 2006, that showed that 85% of people who have a depressive episode recover within 1 year without any treatment.
Speaking of prognosis, gosh, and I hope that offers people tremendous hope. I think it should. It's such a gloomy outlook.
We've become so reliant, haven't we? We've become very used to. I mean, don't get me wrong. Some people are in actual real difficulty. Life's not easy, is it?
No.
It's really not easy. But how do we uncondition ourselves to thinking that if there's something wrong with our lives and we're having difficulty coping with it, that we have to go to a drug? How do we do that?
It's Great question. How do we uncondition? I think this conversation hopefully is one little drop in the ocean of doing that, because I do think we need to be communicating about all these underlying beliefs that we have been conditioned to embrace. And I think the point that you raised about being antidepressants being like the first line of defense essentially is crucial, because it's true that it is often used as the first thing, the first solution. And if you make antidepressants the 10th solution after trying 9 other things seriously, then, that seems more logical to turn to chemical support. Now, yeah, I don't even know if that's true, but the other 9 things, I mean, all the basics of physical and mental, emotional health.
If we had a good prescriber, the first thing they should ask us to do is wait.
Beautiful.
Watchful waiting should be the first, because for most people, life is so fast moving. Our situations change, very quickly. People's lives change, and to give powerful psychoactive drugs as first-line treatment, and very often these physicians can see exactly what is going on in somebody's life. It makes me very angry, actually.
I share that feeling.
It makes me very angry. And again, if prescribers gave us the full information so that we were able to give informed consent when we were given the drugs, if they told us about the adverse effects, if they told us about the long-term effects, if they told us we might become dependent on these drugs and have great difficulty of withdrawing from them, that we might become suicidal, how many people would think twice? I know I would.
I would too.
I know I would. But unfortunately, people aren't being given the opportunity to know everything that they should know about these drugs when they're first prescribed them. And they're not given the opportunity. We've been told we should all be, proactive members of our healthcare team, that we should take responsibility for our healthcare. But at the end of the day, most people still think doctor knows best, so I'm just going to do whatever they tell me.